mission and goals. In 2013, there was a significant upheaval in the CCP government. Xi Jinping launched the so-called anti-corruption campaign, which essentially aimed to eliminate any potential political opponents.
坚持零容忍的态度不变，做到有案必查，有腐必惩，让腐败分子在党内没有任何藏身之地。
As a result, numerous former high-ranking Chinese officials were ousted. Some were even arrested. Leading the charge was Wang Xishan, a former big shot in Beijing, who was once Liu Zhuhua's boss and friend. This crackdown turned China upside down, and Miles and his family were right in the middle of it. According to the internet, the Kwok family was already a major shareholder of Founder Securities at that time, and also held a large number of shares in other stock exchanges. Of course, high-ranking CCP officials had long been eyeing to carve up this lucrative business. Within the circle of Beijing politicians Miles befriended was a close friend named Ma Jian, who served as the deputy minister of the Ministry of State Security at the time. As Ma Jian held numerous pieces of incriminating evidence against Wang Xishan, he became the center of a state-led investigation and was subsequently arrested. Wang Xishan suspected that Miles also held incriminating evidence against him. At the end of 2013, anticipating Wang Xishan's move to arrest him, Miles flew to Hong Kong, but Wang Xishan's retaliation had just begun. On January 10, 2015, while Miles was visiting in the UK, Pangu Plaza was swarmed by dozens of police cars and hundreds of officers encircling the building. During this raid, the police detained numerous Pangu employees and several of Miles's family members, including Miles's 5 brothers, his wife, and his young adult daughter. Using force during these types of raids was commonplace for the CCP, and so it was at Pangu that day. Police violently cleared out all the offices, using force on innocent employees. Miles would get a call a few hours after this horrible event.
如果你在国外，在境外，肆意妄为，以国家为己，必将死无葬身之地。同时，专案组会对你本人和你儿子郭强发出国际红色通缉令。
This man behind the call was Wu Zheng, also known as Bruno Wu, a U.S. citizen holding an American passport, who navigated between the complexities of U.S.-China relations. His underlying identity, however, was that of a spy nurtured over an extended period by the Chinese Communist Party. Wu publicly registered under FARA in the United States and lobbied openly on behalf of the CCP. He was born into a family with a history of espionage. His grandfather provided legal defense for early leaders of the CCP a century ago, rescuing many communist officials from the opponent's Kuomintang prisons. Because of his deep generational ties to the CCP, Wu was able to live above the law in what is informally known as a death exemption plate. On January 20th, 2015, in an effort to gather more information about Miles's activities abroad, the CCP authorities released his wife and daughter, subjecting them to 24-hour surveillance. In the days that followed, several of Miles's family members and employees were also released. However, many endured inhumane treatment and torture, leading to lifelong disabilities. Among them, the CCP detained Miles's 3 brothers for a period ranging from 1 to 2 years. The CCP also established a special task force that appeared daily at Miles's company, conducting comprehensive surveillance of finances and personnel.
你不用担心家人，我会照顾好的。弟妹、女儿，不是已经回去了吗？
啊，再回，但是回来他现在是这个在那个还很多人跟着，然后在五洲酒店，和闺女，然后呢这个一堆人跟着，然后他非常恐惧，家也不让回，那这不行啊。
其实非常生气，要求两边全要他。那个老板也对你很有意见，你知道吗？
Even today, Despite having complete control over all of Miles's domestic assets, the CCP has repeatedly attempted to lure him back to China. At the end of 2016, the Dalian task force arrested Miles's daughter and his brother once again, using this as leverage to compel Miles to return to China to cooperate with the CCP. Repeatedly using his family as leverage, the CCP drove Miles to the edge. Faced with such dire circumstances, Miles's options were limited to either submission or resistance. Miles understood deeply that compliance meant self-destruction, as the CCP consistently oppressed and exploited the people, never demonstrating any semblance of justice or fairness. The deep-seated resentment and anger that Miles had carried for decades finally erupted. Having endured the intrusive malice of the CCP in China for 28 years, brought Miles to a point of no return. A pursuit of justice and freedom would expose the cowardice and shadow warfare of the CCP.
我用我28年的生命看到了他们的堕落。
中纪委书记王岐山和公安部常务副部长傅政华如何会毁掉中国？
不能是真正的腐败者去所谓就反腐，那可能是真反腐吗？
温文论就是一面镜子，不但照妖还照假，真的假不了，假的真不了，一切都是刚开始。谢谢。
我不是什么神医。
On January 26, 2017, Miles decided to sit in front of the camera. This marked his first ever public interview, making him the first Chinese individual to openly defy the Chinese Communist Party on camera and speak out against it. At this time, Miles's concerns extended beyond his family and career. He had abandoned all he had accomplished in the first half of his life and ventured onto a path that was both more difficult and more meaningful. Yet the core of the CCP responded to Miles's actions with a mixture of anger and fear, determined to erase him completely. In addition to being interviewed by certain overseas Chinese media outlets, Miles launched the whistleblower movement on YouTube, utilizing live streams and short videos to share his story. Twitter also became his platform for sharing disclosure whistleblowing documents. However, the CCP's efforts to suppress Miles had already reached the United States. In April 2017, his Twitter account faced its first temporary suspension, even though Miles had already amassed a considerable number of followers. On April 17, 2017, the CCP issued a red notice against Miles in an attempt to discredit him globally. In comparison to the scarce coverage of Miles's revelations, this news was extensively broadcast by major media outlets in China. 2 days later, the Voice of America interview was abruptly terminated by the host due to Miles's attempt to disclose information about the Wang Xishan family and Hainan Airlines. This marked the first instance of a broadcast interruption since VOA began airing in 1942. The host verified in subsequent interviews that they had been instructed by senior CCP officials to abruptly terminate the program. The former senior CCP official, Liu Yanpeng, repeatedly sought to arrange another meeting with Miles in an attempt to achieve reconciliation. He tried to persuade Miles to cease his public revelations by appealing to his and Miles's personal relationship and emphasizing national security concerns. As a CCP representative, Liu Yanpeng also promised to release his family and employees.
这个郭美和他母亲，他们娘俩就要到你这儿去团聚了。我们也营造点好的氛围。大家都冷静一下。你要敢跟我拍胸脯，说从5月3号，从明天开始，你就不发生了。我今天夜里边我不睡觉，我去一家一家去跑去，我也能保证明天开始，这边也什么声音都没有。
While it may seem like Liu was acting in good faith, this would prove to be the brewing of a deceitful scheme. In May 2017, Miles's family and Liu, along with CCP officials, flew from Beijing to New York. Little did Liu know that the scheme he and 3 other CCP operatives devised to secretly arrest Miles had already come under surveillance by the U.S. government. On May 24th, Liu and 3 other CCP operatives were stopped by the FBI on their way to Washington.